All right. The first topic we're going to talk about is the collapse in institutional trust, which I think for people inside of Bitcoin, crypto, kind of the decentralized world, individual sovereignty, that are interested in those ideas, this is like duh, right? Of course, there's a collapse of institutional trust. People who maybe are just new to this stuff or who are listening to this for the first time, this may actually be shocking to them. So walk me through how you think about that falling amount of trust. And is there like a quantifiable metric that you look at, or is it more so just sentiment and kind of anecdotal evidence?
Well, I think this is obviously subjective, but A16Z, Andreessen Horowitz, put together a Web3 policy team that's been doing a lot of work in DC, trying to educate policymakers on what crypto is, broadly what Web3 is. That, there's been a little bit of an attempt to rebrand crypto as Web3 because it's a little bit more friendly of a term, it's less scary, and it's I think more reflective of the fact that we are trying to rebuild, the entire internet, not just cryptocurrencies. But in their education document and presentation to policymakers, they have this really amazing graphic that is a chart on two axes based on competence and trust. So low trust, high trust, high competence, low competence, and this was based on survey results from Edelman, big market research firm, that basically showed no modern institution is seen as both high trust and high competence, right? So NGOs, like nonprofits, were considered high trust, but not necessarily high competence. Businesses were considered high competence, but lower on the trust axis. And then you had the mainstream media and the government. So basically, the three branches of the government, and then the fourth estate, the media, as ranking very negatively in both competence and trust. And when you're living in an environment like that, and you see everything that we've seen over the last couple of years that folks in your audience are I'm sure have heard relentlessly, 40% of dollars printed in the last 18 months. We've mismanaged COVID. The Afghanistan exit was a disaster. You're seeing progressively more censorship, deplatforming. There's just I think this bubbling sentiment that the systems that we've built are slowly disintegrating, and really there's kind of an absence of leadership. And I think it took a while, even for me, because I got into Bitcoin back in 2013, and even back then it kind of felt like a pessimistic bet on the future. But over the last few years, you started to realize that like Bitcoin and crypto powered networks might actually be the only quote unquote institution that could fit in that upper right hand quadrant that's both high trust, thanks to encryption, and high competence, because you have the best, most talented people in the world that are flooding into the space at an alarming rate, and building things that people are actually using now. So I think the framing is you're not going to be excited about crypto if your life is perfect and you think that everything is going just swimmingly, and you're one of the like 11% of people that think Congress is doing a good job. But for everybody else, there's kind of this like simmering unrest for the last several years. It really got thrown into high gear thanks to COVID, and it's kind of brought a lot of the problems with our existing institutions into focus. The question now is, which ones do we slowly replace with decentralized math-based systems using crypto versus which ones are actually going to maintain credibility and survive this transformation?
So in the document, you explicitly call out the difference between mercenaries and missionaries. And you basically say, whether you're here as a missionary or a mercenary, you'll find that one of the primary unifying forces behind this movement is the belief that decentralized technologies with embedded financial incentives offer a compelling, often lucrative alternative to our decaying legacy institutions. Which, first of all, is just like a pro-level sentence that you put together there. But this idea of both mercenary and missionary, both finding kind of a home or value in this. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between those two groups of people coming together around one common set of technologies?
I'll paraphrase a number of smart people that have said this, but crypto is a new tech paradigm dressed as a Ponzi scheme, right? Something along those lines. And the reason that Bitcoin and these other systems have taken off is because they've been bootstrapped into existence by speculators, folks that believe in this vision of the future, that ultimately are going to be rewarded for their early faith, even if it does take a while for mainstream adoption to take root, right? So a perfect example is Bitcoin. Until the infamous Bitcoin pizza transaction, which in hindsight is hundreds of millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin, right? Without that transaction, you don't have the first proof of concept that you could actually buy something real with Bitcoin, right? It's I think the same with many of these other emerging assets. Like without the first ICOs on Ethereum, you couldn't prove that Ether would be a reserve currency for all types of decentralized finance applications. Without the crypto punks airdrop and some of these games that have emerged as far back as 2017, you wouldn't have been able to prove that non-fungible tokens or NFTs could be these really interesting scarce digital objects with different storable attributes. So I think the missionaries are the ones that see this, get excited, and then build and stick around for the long term, whether it's a bear market where they're kind of in the trenches building for the next cycle, or the mercenaries that quite frankly are just at worst necessary evils, but at best they're the backstops of the entire new financial system, right? Without the speculators, without these deep-pocketed individuals, you don't have liquid markets, and you certainly don't have the market cap that we have today that can attract the type of new inflows that we're seeing that's going to fund new applications and new infrastructure and kind of continue the upward momentum of the rest of the industry. So I think it's crazy with crypto how compressed these hype cycles are. If you think about like the classic peak of inflated expectations and then the long trough of disillusionment and then kind of the gradual upslope in the installation phase. We've seen like 6 or 7 of these in crypto over the last decade, and I think all along that curve, you've got different personas that are playing a role in the build out of this ecosystem.